afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our June 2023 edition of Third Thursday Training with the Harvest Baptist Association. Today today's a bittersweet day. We're excited, but also sorrowful to be saying, kind of having our last Third Thursday Training with Gerry. He is, as many of you I'm sure know, and by the time some of you see this may be all wrapped up and done. But Gerry is wrapping up 15 years with the Harvest Baptist Association as our executive director and associational missional strategist. And I don't know how many times, Gerry, your title has changed in the last 15 years, but that's where we are now, I guess. So we're glad to talk to Gerry and just kind of get his thoughts as he wraps up his time here at Harvest and enters into a season of retirement, and what kind of looking back on the 15 years and then what the future holds for him. So Gerry, we're glad that you're sitting down with us and just to talk to us about kind of your reflections during your time with the association.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be doing this, and it's bittersweet in every direction.
Yeah,
we're excited about what's ahead, but yeah, this is a tough transition.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Well, let's go back. We're talking about you transitioning out. Let's go back to the transition 15 years ago. How did you decide to make that transition? Because you had been serving individual local churches. I know worship ministry, music ministry, and then also as a pastor. I don't know if you ever did a gig as a youth minister, if you ever did that part of it. But so talk about that transition from pastoring a local church to serving a family of churches. How did that take place?
Sure, and just to give a little bit of the history, I started my first church job, even though I wasn't paid anything for it, but I became music director. I think that was the title they used of my church when I was 15 years old, and did that until I graduated from high school and left college. So, I'm at 46 plus years now of doing that. Did music and youth combined for 4 years in seminary, and then 20 years as a senior pastor, or in the cases of the churches I served as the solo pastor. But anyway, 2 churches over 20 years, and then to the association from there for the last 15. So but from the time I came to seminary and the church that I served as music and youth minister for those 4 years, which is the same church that I came back and served as pastor for 17 years. The pastor that was there, that was really a father in the ministry to me, he was very involved in the association. And so he took me to a lot of stuff. And so I always was pretty engaged in association stuff. The first little church that I pastored in Tucumcari, New Mexico, we had an area that was 2 associations together, covering a pretty broad area. Not very many churches because it was New Mexico and there weren't a lot out there. But I was really involved and was an officer and all that stuff. And then came back and remained really involved in Tarrant Association my whole time. So I was always really involved in associational stuff. And I had even submitted a resume at one time for another association opening that was 2 or 3 years before I came to Harvest, and went through an initial interview and said, I don't know why anybody would ever want to do this. It was a different experience than the interview that I had with Harvest. But so I was just rolling along and happy doing what I was doing. Was coming up on 17 years at the church, and I got a phone call one day. Was home on a day off, didn't recognize the number, so I didn't answer it. I went back and listened to the voicemail, and it said, "Gerry, this is God, call me." And for anybody that was around way back then, you'd probably know that that was Bobby Cox, who was the my predecessor at Harvest. And he and I had been friends for a long time. And he'd previously been on staff at Tarrant, and that's where we got to know each other. And so I called him back and said, if this is God, my theology is seriously messed up. But anyway, he said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to retire. Are you interested?" And I said, "Nope, absolutely not. I'm happy doing what I'm doing." The church was really, we were starting to build a little momentum. We had mission trips on the horizon, and we had a good staff, and just a lot of good things. And so he said, "You're not even going to pray about it?" And I said, "Okay, well, if you play the prayer card, I'll do that." This was early December of 2007. And so at the end of the year, the last Sunday of the year, I preached a sort of get ready for the new year sermon. And in the middle of that sermon, I said, "Do something dangerous in 2008. And my illustrations were get involved in a ministry you haven't before, or read a book, or whatever. Just do something that take you out of your comfort zone." And on the way home from church that day, it wasn't an out loud voice, but God spoke to me pretty clearly and said, "So were you just preaching, or were you serious?" And and so I said, "Okay, I'll send a resume." And I thought, sending a resume, then that was the part I'd done. I can get back to my business. And over the next several months, God really changed the direction. And I had a first interview, and you were there. You were in fact the chair of that team by virtue of what you were doing in the association at that point. And I came home that day and told my wife, I'm still not really interested, but if I were going to work with a group, I think I could work with these people. And I told God, I'm going to have something really, really clear. You're going to have to speak to me from your word. And so, I'm just going along, and I was praying hard. I was spending time in God's word every day, just really looking for God to say something to me. And I felt like God was speaking, except what I felt like he was doing was saying, "Okay, you're going to have to trust me." Well, God, you're not helping. I'm going to have to do that regardless. And I had another meeting, and I'm trying to shorten this as much as possible so we can do more than one question on this. But I think you called me and said, "We would like to invite you to come." And I said, "I need 24 hours." And so the next morning I got up and I opened my Bible to where I had left off the previous day, and just picked up reading in the next one. And God says to Samuel, "How long will you grieve for Saul? Fill your horn with oil and go." And he was to go and anoint David as the next king of Israel. But fill your horn with oil and go. I just pretty much couldn't get past that. And so I said, "Okay, here we go." So people have asked me over the years, what made you leave the pastorate and that's all I can do is blame it on God. It took him several months to make it clear, but for me, he finally made it clear to the point that I was convinced that to not do it would be disobedient. And that was what I told the church when I announced my resignation. I said, I really believe that God has made his purpose in my life clear right now. And for me to not do it would be disobedient to him, and it wouldn't be good for you.
Mm.
And so that was the hardest move I have made,
Yeah.
as an adult and as a full-time ministry person.
Yeah. So having heard that voice and responded to it and committed to walk in obedience, what were some of your expectations, if you remember back 15 years, uh, sort of coming in? Obviously, you were familiar with association work. You kind of knew how things operated, but what were some of your expectations, maybe that you can look back on and pinpoint coming in?
Yeah. So, I it's funny because over the first few months, I'd run into people. I'd occasionally see people from the church that I'd pastored, and of course, I stayed in contact, and I actually stayed as a member there for a couple of years. Um, and they would say, "So, is it everything you thought it would be?" And my standard answer was, "I had no idea what it was going to be, so I guess so." Uh, there were in a lot of ways, I didn't know what to expect.
Hmm.
I mean, I knew kind of what my obviously what my experience has been, the examples that I had had. One of a guy that was not particularly effective, but was a good guy in New Mexico, and then one in an Tarrant Association for several years that was extremely effective and very influential in my life and all that. So I had my own experience there, but how that was going to translate, and I just wasn't sure. I think I had an expectation that people that pastors in particular were going to approach association ministry as I had, and that was to be excited about partnering together, and and then they were going to be excited about my role in facilitating that, and I expected, because I've always been kind of a learning, I don't know if nerd or addict or whatever, but I love learning new stuff and developing new skills and all that. And I kind of expected that the pastors would be that way too. And I discovered that some of those expectations weren't based in reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it probably mirrors to some degree the expectation going into the pastorate or going into
Yep.
church ministry. I had a lot of those. Well, if I just make the case from scripture for these people, they'll buy in and they'll be on board. Well, no, there are other factors at play. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I get that. I get that. So what were some of the biggest surprises? Things that maybe you say you didn't really know what to expect, but things that really surprised you, good or bad, things that
Yeah.
really alarmed you or that really excited you.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I hit pretty early on was, and I shouldn't have, this shouldn't have been a surprise. I shouldn't have missed this, but I think I had been in one place for so long. I'd been in the same community, pastoring the same church for 17 years, very engaged in the community, on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, all kinds of things like that, really well known in the community. And it took me a few months to figure out I'm starting from scratch.
Mm.
These are not people that, I mean, the people that have known me the longest are the people who interviewed me. And and they haven't known me very long either. So I had a lot of trust built up where I was, a lot of even outside my church, even in the community. If I said it was a good idea, there were a lot of people who would go, "Well, okay."
Mm.
And so that, I said, it shouldn't have taken me by surprise, but it did. And so I kind of had to rethink things a little bit and realize that, I've got to spend time building relationships with people because they got to know that they can trust me, that, that I'm not going to drive them off into the ditch. So that was, like I said, it shouldn't have been a surprise, but it was. And and then, of course, I started in June of 2008, and the economy crashed in October. And that was, of course, I think that was a surprise to everybody. So it certainly affected me personally. It affected my kids because I lost a lot of their college funds. But it also affected the association because the association had been in really good shape financially, and the churches were doing well. There was a lot of things going, and then all of a sudden it's hitting everybody hard. And it's hit churches hard, and certainly when it hits churches hard, it hits the association hard. And we moved from a place where you got a lot of free stuff and all that, to figuring out how we're gonna survive through this. So that was certainly an unexpected surprise. And then about 2 years in, I get a call in the middle of the night, and Elaine says, "Gerry, our building's on fire." And and so that was certainly a surprise to enter into that time. So those were hard surprises. Some other surprises that maybe still were hard, but I think it helped a lot, is realizing that early on we'd had the economic stress, and we'd had the fire and all that kind of stuff, and I'm wondering, did I miss God on this? Am I really the guy and it's supposed to be here for this? And I realized that I was trying to meet what I perceived as expectations of people, of churches, of pastors, and all that, and trying to figure out what to be, instead of being who I am, and operating in my areas of competence and my my areas of giftedness, so it was a pleasant surprise, I guess, and again, probably it shouldn't have been a surprise, but to come to the realization that for whatever reason, God didn't make a mistake. He has me here, and He knew who I was before He put me here. And so the things that were important to me, the things that I was passionate about, the things that were areas that I already had some competency and giftedness in, I could lean into those, and then also recognize that there's an opportunity to learn some new skills, and develop some new competencies, and see this as a different way. Probably a couple of years in, I went to a conference, and something that one of the speakers said, and it was a conference for directors of missions, and one of the speakers said, "This is hard for you guys that have been pastors, to move into this role, because you are accustomed to working in a system, and now it's really more your role to work on the system and not within the system so much." And that kind of clicked with me, to say, I am a step removed from all these churches. And so I'm really not engaging in their ministries. I'm trying to work on creating systems and cultures and all of that enhance the ministry of churches, and allow me to give the support, to give the direction, provide some resources and all that kind of things, but to not be engaged necessarily in the implementation of that within churches. And so that that was a good discovery. Just to kind of, after a couple of years, to figure out, okay, this is the role that I have. I'm the interested outsider, who can offer something, but is still not within the system.
Yeah. Well, and that's a unique gift in that you can you're a disinterested party, but you're also an interested party. You're not part of the issue, but you can provide a unique perspective, and you do care what happens, because it does affect you and your role. So that's interesting. That's a unique position to be in.
Yeah.
So let me ask this as kind of a two-part question. In thinking about all of your tasks, responsibilities, ministry areas, what were maybe one or two things that really required the most work on your part, that you really had to devote time and effort and energy to? And then what part or parts brought you the most joy? And those could be the same thing,
Sure.
but I want to ask it separately in case you want to divide those out.
Yeah, I think one of the things that from day one until now is one of the hardest things, and that is communication. Okay, sorry. That's the bad thing about doing this on my phone, that messages are keeping coming in. Try to get out of the way. But figuring out how best, as the outsider who is not there. The one thing, and in fact, I talked to a pastor, and we've had several conversations over the years, who had been asked to consider becoming the director of missions of another association. And he told me that one of the reasons that he chose not to was that he realized how difficult it is to get the message across to people that you're not in front of every week. And so, as a pastor, that communication and helping people to be on board with what's going on is still difficult. However, you do have some built-in opportunities every week to communicate with them, to share what's going on. They almost have to choose to not pay attention to not know what's going on. But in this case, knowing who will read emails, who prefers a phone call, who would rather have a text message, who would rather have a Facebook message, all that kind of stuff. And I think too, that's been another one of the things that has, over the past 15 years, the ways of communication and the communication technologies have expanded so much. I mean, we were still trying to do a printed newsletter when I first came, and trying to get that out. There were some people that didn't like it when we stopped doing that. But figuring out how to consistently to not only know what's important to share, but then how to do it, and realizing that there's all these different ways, and different people receive those messages in different ways. And I don't know that I ever got a handle on it. We tried a lot of things, and sometimes the medium matters, sometimes it's the content, and so it's funny. I could use the same thing, and send a mass text message out to pastors and get almost no response. And then if the subject is different, get a lot of responses. So, but I would say that has consistently been the thing that's been the hardest in terms of trying to figure out how to be effective, is just how to communicate. I think the other thing that's been a work for me is because I'm very relational, and because I'm kind of a big picture guy. Just the details of administration, and it's not that I am not able to do it, because I am able to do it, and I can do it really well. I just don't like it. I made a joke to somebody one time and said, I took out my checkbook and said, my idea of a balanced checkbook is I hold it up like this. And I said, and I'm not telling you I don't know how to do it. I'm just telling you I don't like doing it.
Yeah.
And so the administrative things, and a lot of that, and it kind of relates with the communication and being the outsider, and all those kind of things. But one thing that I think is a little bit more unique about the association, is about a church, is in a church, you may not, people may not be happy with the things that you're doing all the time, but you don't have to spend a whole lot of time convincing people that the church is valuable. And I think you do more in the association, and part of that is because there's so many. You've got state conventions, you've got the denomination, you've got various other, kind of more affinity kind of groups that people connect with, and they connect at different levels, but everybody has limited bandwidth. And so, I think almost every entity at some point has to figure out how to demonstrate, their value, that it's worth engaging with, and so that's kind of ongoing. Say you'd like to spend time doing other things, but you got to do the things to make sure that people still think that the ministry itself is valuable. It's I've had people tell me, hey, I like you and you're helpful, but I don't know so much about the association. And at this point in time, those are kind of one and the same.
Yeah. Well, and especially if you're trying to convince the one that maybe should be an advocate for the association to the church, whether that's I would assume typically a pastor or some other person in a leadership position. Like, in our context, I don't need you to come in and explain the value of the association to our church, because I'm going to do that because I see the value in it. But I can see how that would require a lot of work when you're having to spend time convincing those who then have to be convinced in order to convince the church why it matters.
Yeah, and there's I think how I was going to say that. I got distracted by the message that just came down in front of me. But the idea of, because I spent all those years as a pastor, and I still think in very many ways like a pastor, I am always going to go through the pastor. Yeah. I'm never going to go around the pastor. So, there are ways that I could have communicated in other ways, but I am never never going to be one that says, okay, if the pastor is not on board with this, I'll just figure out a way to how to get around him
Mm,
to the church.
yeah.
And so it's, then it becomes really important that I'm communicating with pastors and helping them to see the value
Yeah.
in that, and so that, and then, you and I've had enough conversations over the last few years to know that, when you have a church that becomes pastorless, but the pastor has been the one you've gone through, and then the
Yeah.
only point of communication, and that becomes difficult sometimes. So yeah, so those are just the ongoing things that have been the most work,
Mhm.
and probably the most stress.
Yeah. So what about the flip side of that? What are the things that have brought you the most joy just in your day-to-day, tasks and responsibilities? What are the things that you really that just energize you?
Yeah, and it's going to be relationships, and encouraging pastors and leaders, and when I get, whether it's on the phone, or whether I'm having coffee or lunch with somebody, or it's a text exchange or whatever, just being the safe place for somebody
Mm,
to either ask a question that I may not have the answer to, but I can help them walk through it, and I can help them maybe get to place, or just somebody that said, man, it's Monday, and
mm,
Sunday was rough, and to be able to sit with a minute. So first and foremost, it's just been the relationships, encouraging pastors and churches. And then I love, because I love learning so much, I love facilitating
mm,
things. So to get a group together and say, hey, let's learn this together, or let's explore this, or whatever. I just love that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Uh, so helping people to maybe see things just from a different perspective,
Yeah.
because I've never seen myself as an expert on anything, but uh, but I love being able to help somebody to step from a different angle, and look at that, and ask good questions, and so coaching and that kind of stuff, that I can do that all day, and I'll be exhausted at the end of the day, but it's a good day.
Yeah.
Have me doing the administrative stuff all day.
Yeah.
It's not a good
Right.
day.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm glad for Amy and Elaine before her.
Yes.
Yeah. So kind of related to that, looking back at the last 15 years, what are a few of the highlights that you look back on and you just say, God did something incredible or unique, or it was amazing to see God, you even to see God use you to accomplish something for His kingdom. What are just a handful maybe of those highlights?
It sounds crazy, but I think back to the fire at some point, um, and that was, I said, I was just past my 2-year anniversary, June 1st, 2008, and the fire was July 10th of 2010.
Mm,
Um, and I still didn't feel like I had things figured out, and that comes in, and for a while it was, everything, we're far enough removed from it now that we don't as often say, well, that was before the fire or after the fire, but for several years that was kind of a marker. But one thing it gave an opportunity to do was to rethink everything,
mm,
because we had a natural built-in transition, when the building burns down and you lose all of your equipment and everything else, to say, okay, what do we need to do,
mm,
to go forward, and and what does this need to look like, for everything from rebuilding a building, and buying new equipment, and it all, but it gave us an opportunity, and it actually was, I think it probably took several years of rethinking things, but I think not long after that, on the heels of that, we had a group that went through Association Unique, as a part of a collab with some other associations, and really thinking through, what are our key values, and our strategies, and that really, in many ways, reshaped the way that we function for the last 10 years or so, to just, kind of run things through that filter, whenever somebody says, well, we should do this. Okay, how's it helping us to develop leaders, the legacy kind of deal? How's it helping us to engage with communities? How's it helping us to partner for the kingdom? And, to be able to look at that through that lens. So I think that kind of time period of the reset, to me is a highlight, even though, if you look at that and you say, okay, there's all these great ministries that were started. I don't know if there were, but I think there was a focus that happened at that point that helped us, even to be strategic in subsequent challenges, and to figure out, this is what we're about. And so when we hit the challenge of the COVID shutdown, or whatever that is, to kind of give a light to get through this darkness here, and to figure out what to particularly invest ourselves in as we go. So that was a highlight in a crazy kind of way. I think another highlight for me, because it significantly helped me define the way that I was going to operate, is, and it was, I think, the same year as the fire. It was earlier in the year, but when I began training as a coach, because it changed the way that I interacted with people, and honestly, took a lot of pressure off me to be the guy with the answers, and I don't have to be with the guy with all the answers, because I can say, hey, I know a lot of stuff, but I also know how to ask questions, and a lot of stuff that you just haven't figured out that yet. And helping people to find their own way through some things. So that was a highlight for me, to begin that journey, and and I've continued with that, and will even into the future. You were a part of the first group we did of dangerous pastors, and the 3 or 4 years that we did that. That was a highlight for me, and to be able to invest more deeply in a group of guys for an extended period of time, and then to see different ones go to different places, and to have that ministry expand, not the ministry itself, but what was done through that process. Yeah. So that was a super big highlight for me to be able to walk that through, and honestly, if I have a regret, it's not getting that going again after the first few years. We kind of hit a spot that everybody that currently was the pastors that were currently in the association that were open to it, everybody pretty much had. And I'm gonna trust that it was okay, but I would have liked to do that with some more guys.
Yeah, Very good. Well, I'll say that was a highlight for me as well over the last 15 years. Just those relationships I made with those guys, and you know talking through those things and the discipleship process for a church, and that was that was that was fantastic. I look back on that with great fondness.
Yeah.
So, what is your hope for the Harvest Baptist Association in the coming days? So, as you transition out and head off to retirement in Amarillo, what are your, if you could articulate kind of your hopes for the churches here?
Yeah, you know what I would hope and pray for and love to see is increased cooperation and collaboration. You know, the things that we've seen over the last few years. Um, you know, everything from the way that y'all have done Vacation Bible School in Nocona, with churches partnering together for that, to the last couple of years of churches working together on some mission trips. And this week, that several churches that have worked together on Impact Week over in Jacksboro. And so to see more of that, I think the opportunities for local ministry that can just help people within our churches and help people that are observing from the outside to see God's people working together for the benefit of the communities. And of course, we understand it's for the purpose of extending an awareness of the kingdom and all that. But that's an inside stuff. But for people that observe it from the outside, to say, here are people that are working together because they want to see our community become a more resilient community, and they want to see people loving each other and encouraging each other and helping each other, and so that would be my prayer. And I think it's really important. And as I've been here in New Orleans this week at Southern Baptist Convention, and I loved what you posted on Facebook this morning about people. There are a lot of voices that are saying a lot of things, and I would say most of the voices that I've seen they don't have any kind of malicious motives or anything. They just don't understand the way things work. But even understanding the way things work, to say that any sort of division or conflict is not existent would be a gross misstatement. So I think it's really important for the association to be a place that we say, there are things that are important, and there are things that we have some differences about, but here's what we can agree on, and here's what we can work toward. And the association is honestly, I think, more about helping people do ministry, and helping churches to engage with their communities. And there's a unique thing that can happen in associations that you don't have to. And it's not that the things that are happening on a broader level are not important. It's just that the closer you are to where you live and work and play every day, those are the places where effective ministry happens.
Yeah.
Uh, and, so that's, that's one of the things, going all the way back 15 years to when we were in this interview process. And, one of the things that I said in the first interview is, I am not interested in all of the politics of Baptist life and all that. And everyone around that table said, we're not either. And that was
Yeah.
one of the reasons that I went home and told my wife, I can work with these people. Still don't want to at this point, but I can.
I had a conversation with someone just within the last couple of days. It was in regard to some of the stuff going on in the convention, and we talked about if this is my conviction, just pick something. Do I have a place in the convention? Or if I have the opposite conviction, as long as it's within the bounds of, our confessional statement, do I have a place here? Do I belong here? And one of the things that I think that you've done a really good job at fostering is that regardless of which state convention you belong to, regardless of some of the third tier doctrinal convictions that a pastor might have or that a church might have, that you have a place in this cooperative effort of mission. And I think I've felt that, and it's helped me to see people who might not share some of my doctrinal convictions, some of those things on the second or third tier, that we're still in this together. We're teammates. We may not be able to do everything together, but we can do some things together.
Sure.
And so I appreciate that, and I share that hope with you that moving forward, that message would be very clear in the churches of our association.
Yeah, Josh, I've been in this a long time, as far as this world. And I used to tell my church years ago, and regardless of, what it was, whether it was a boycott that was being announced or, whatever it is. And I said, look, we are going to focus on being the people of God where he has put us right here. And if the state convention or the Southern Baptist Convention or whatever just blows up tomorrow, we're still going to be here. And we're still going to have this call from God to be the people of God in this community. And I really think, and in many ways, the association is the same. Well, I don't know what's going to, I think there's some pretty significant things going on in the convention right now. And there are going to be, even before some of the things over the last couple of days, I was pretty well convinced that when this convention is over, there are going to be some people leaving the convention one way or another.
Yeah.
And that is what it is. But I am convinced that the association can be a place where we can say, if it all falls apart, we can still have a ministry together. And I think probably one benefit that we have, at least in our part of the world and in Texas and all that, is that because we are not dependent on financial resources from the convention or the denomination or anything like that. It's a challenge sometimes that the association is completely funded by the churches in the association, but it also means that if some of that other stuff goes away, we can still do our work. And so, every entity in Baptist life has its place. That meeting that you and I were in a couple of years ago with George Bullard, and talking about each one having a lane. Yeah. And as a part of the Baptist movement, I think was the term that he used. Yeah. But so our lane will not cease to exist. if something happens, if there's if there's a wreck or a roadblock or whatever in the other lanes, our lanes is still, we can still function in our lane, and that's what I hope for the association.
Yeah, it's interesting. The closer you or the closer you get to home, the more local you get. I think the less the big national stuff has an impact. I was on a Facebook group yesterday, and they did a poll question. How much will what happened in New Orleans affect your local church? And the overwhelming response on the poll was not at all.
Yeah,
It will have no effect at all, or very little effect on the ministry of our local church. And I think it's very similar in the association. Now you get to the state convention level, maybe a little more
sure.
impact, certainly at the national, that expression of our Baptist work, it's going to have more impact. But locally, we can continue to partner together on in mission. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, of course, one of the big things has been the whole women in ministry deal. That's been the hot thing in the convention deal. I was doing a pastor search team training with one of our churches a couple of years ago, and they and it was funny. There was a lady that was on the pastor search team, and she says, "Does the Southern Baptist Convention allow female pastors?" Well, the answer was different 2 years ago than it is now.
Right.
But what I said, well, it's really not a matter of what the convention allows. So here's the cool thing about your church is if you don't want a female pastor, you don't even have to receive a resume from one. I
Right.
mean, it doesn't even have to be controversial in your church. I mean, you can, if you get a resume from a female, you can just say, no, that one's not going to be considered, and you're done with it. So they're just the closer you are to home, the less. And it's not that this stuff doesn't matter,
Right.
but it's less that it can become disruptive.
Yeah.
So there are great benefits to investing more of yourself in the things that you're closer to.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, and I'll share this kind of as a commercial for anybody watching, not because Gerry asked me or even knew that I was going to say this. We've made the decision as a church. We've always been a 10% cooperative program giving church, and we've made it clear to our state association or our state convention that we get to choose how that money is split. And so we do a 50-50 split. So 5% of our undesignated offering goes to the Southern Baptist Convention, 5% goes to our state convention. And I began asking the question, why are they getting more of an investment than our local association? And so we made the decision as a church to work up to 5%. So we were at 2, then we went to 3. This year we're at 4. Lord willing, next year we'll be at 5%, because there is value in investing close to home. Locally with people that people that you can see, people that you can step up and work right alongside with. And so that's been an encouraging thing for me from our church. And I would hope that maybe other churches might consider the value of that investment as well.
Yeah. Well, and now that I can't receive any perceived benefit from that, I endorse this plan.
Yeah. Awesome. So last question, what are your plans come July 1st? What are your plans in retirement?
Yeah, well, I guess, if you were to ask my wife what my plans are, she would say, I'm going to spend a whole lot of time getting things unpacked in Amarillo.
Yeah.
She's ready for me to get there. Some people know, everybody doesn't know, but she's already there. Once we got our house in Azle ready to put on the market, she went ahead and moved to Amarillo. And so she's there unpacking a box at a time while I'm finishing out this time to the end of the month. But, one of the reasons that, and a lot of people know this, but I'll, just real quickly hit this, because the 2 most common questions I get asked when anybody hears what I'm doing is they go, why in the world would you move to Amarillo? And if you've not lived in the Panhandle and you just passed through there, or especially if you've been through there in the winter, that's a legitimate question. Or in the spring where the wind is blowing 50 miles an hour every day. But when I say 4 grandchildren that live within 15 minutes of my house, then they go, oh, okay. And that's, and that's really our kids and grandkids are all within 15 minutes of each other. And so it was on the idea for some point in time anyway. And we wouldn't even be considering moving if they weren't all there together.
Yeah.
But knowing that we might do it sometime, we began talking a while back about if we were going to do this, maybe we ought to think about doing it while we're young enough that we're not just moving up there for them to take care of the old people. And so we can be involved in their lives, but we can also have a life. And I think, I'm 61. I'll be 62 at the end of this year. And I think I've still got probably another 10 years of effective ministry in me. And so I'm hoping to make the most of this while still being able to be more engaged in our kids and grandkids' lives. But I'm going to be I'm going to spend more time doing some more writing. I've written a few books and done a few things, and I'd like to do more of that. I am friends with the association directors of all those associations up in the Panhandle. There's about 4 of them within 100 miles of Amarillo, and I plan to be available to them, to help them in any way that my skill set allows me to help them. And they all know me and know that I don't want their job, and that I would want to be a cheerleader for them and their associations as much as I've thought it's my role to be a cheerleader for our pastors and our association. And then I'm also the one thing that my wife is excited about is that I do have a part-time job that is consistent, and I'm going to start in July. I'm going to work for Texas Baptist Men a couple of days a week, doing church engagement, and honestly doing a whole lot of the same kind of stuff that I've been doing in the association. I'm just not in charge of the organization, but encouraging pastors and churches and directors of missions, and and helping. When I was first approached about the possibility of doing this, I said, "You're not going to ask me to raise money, are you? Because that is not my thing." And they said, "No, we got somebody else to do that." So, so they said, all we want you to do is to encourage relationships. And Texas Baptist Men has really grown over the past few years. And of course, a lot of people know that, they're primarily known for disaster relief. But, the builders, the church builders and camp builders, and then doing, Amarillo has been flooding for the past several weeks, fortunately not my house up there, but a lot of places. And so Texas Baptist Men have been up there dealing with flood stuff. But another thing they do is they drill water wells and do water purification systems all over the world. They've been in Turkey and they've been in Ukraine, and they've been training disaster relief crews in Israel. And, so there's a lot of things like that. And they really needed somebody in the Panhandle that's, that could be available to connect with churches and stuff. So I'm going to do part-time for them, probably a couple of days a week. And so I've already gotten a call from a church about the possibility of being an interim pastor. So I'm going to have plenty of things on my plate
Yeah.
I didn't mention that the second most common question is people say, so do you know where you're going to go to church?
Mm.
And I said, for the first time in 40 years, I'm going to be like a normal person. I'm going to move to a community. I'm going to take some time visiting churches. I'm going to find one that I think is a good fit.
Mm.
And that's where I'm going to go.
Nice. But I bet it's been a long time. Have you ever been able to do that?
Not in my adult life. I mean, I graduated from college in May. We got married in July, went on our honeymoon, and a week later came back and interviewed and was at a church in view of a college music and youth minister. So it really has been almost 40 years since, I didn't have, since, I didn't kind of have a church picked for me before I moved.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I wanted to let everybody know there is a retirement party scheduled for Friday evening, June the 23rd at 6:30 at First Baptist Church in Decatur. If you'd like to come and just tell Gerry how much you have appreciated him and his ministry, and wish him the best in the next season of his life. And I think they're asking for an RSVP, so you can go to the association Facebook page, or maybe call the association office and get some more information on how to RSVP for that. But that would be a great opportunity. And so anything else, Gerry, that you would like to just share, kind of wrapping up?
I just like to say that these 15 years, I mean, it has been such an incredible blessing for me. It's been an honor for me. And, I've over the last few years, as I've thought about, what would it be like to end? And there's a time or two that I thought, I hadn't accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish. And my wife helped me one day, and she said, what your legacy is going to be is all those pastors that knew that they could call you. Yeah. And that you were a safe place and that you would listen to them. And I would say that to be able to do that, driving me crazy. I got housekeeping knocking at my door. All right, I'm going to walk over here. I'm going to say this. Can you come back in about 5 minutes? Yes.
That's good TV right there.
That is. I am not going to edit that out. I'm leaving it in.
That's perfect.
But anyway, I mean, it's just, the relationships built, and the ways that that God has let me encourage people, and the way that God has used people to encourage me. It's been an honor and a blessing. And it would be a lie to say I have loved every minute of it, but I've loved every part of it.
Yeah. Yep. It's interesting that you mentioned your legacy being the relationships and the pastors, and that was the exact same answer you gave for what was your greatest joy. And yeah. I don't think that's an accident that God allows our joy to be our legacy. The thing that really thrills us and delights us to be the thing that we're remembered for. And so I that's what I'll remember. And I just want to let you know how much you're loved and appreciated, and I'm sure you'll receive that during that retirement party, and in the next few weeks, as people are able to call and grab lunch and send cards and all those things. But thank you so much for your investment in me and the churches and this association. So we love you and we appreciate you, and you've always got a place here. And we will definitely pray for you as you make this transition. So
thank you. Appreciate you so much, Dave.
Thanks, Gerry. And for those of you who are maybe watching, just because Gerry is not going to be our executive director does not mean that third Thursday training stops. I'll still be here. We'll still be making connections with some good resources and ministry leaders that we feel can provide some value for you guys as pastors and church leaders. So we'll be back, Lord willing, in July. We're working on lining up some great interviews for you. So until then, stay faithful and keep loving the Lord. So thanks, Gerry.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.